I think growing up, on a farm, my parents are farmers. That was such a great upbringing. We really were taught a strong work ethic from a very, young stage of our lives.
When does the entrepreneurial brain click in and go, I want to start something myself?
My older sister, who was very sort of instrumental in my thinking at that point in time, she sort of encouraged me to not go down the Big Four path, and I'm so glad she did. I just want to continue to provide opportunities for our really talented team that we've got, and I think we've got the ability to grow to 80 plus. There's no doubt about that.
Welcome to the Success Times Happiness podcast, a platform dedicated to engaging discussions with inspiring individuals aimed at nurturing personal development. I'm Richard Thompson, your host, a father, entrepreneur, world champion Ultraman, and passionate about all things high performance. Our mission is to empower both ourselves and you to unlocking our fullest potential, recognizing that this life is no dress rehearsal. While I may not have all the answers, this show serves as our collective journey to uncover them. This episode, we sit down with Lachlan Ballinger, the founder and managing director of Yield Advisory. Yield is a multi-award-winning accounting and business advisory business. But this episode is not about numbers. Lachlan was one of the first accounting practices in the country to partner with Xero and adopt a paperless system. They have been innovating from day one. From 2 people around a kitchen table 10 years ago to now a team of over 40 across Brisbane, Sydney and the Sunshine Coast, Loch is an inspiring leader. And in this ep, expect to learn about his story, how to pursue high performance on the daily, growing a business sustainably and cultivating the very best team. All right, let's get into it. Lachlan Ballinger, welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Yield Advisory, you're the managing director, founder, and for people who have followed the journey, there's been a lot of growth in recent times, but it's almost 10 years since you started.
Yeah, we have got our 10-year anniversary actually this Sunday, so we're incredibly proud, and it's amazing how fast the last 10 years has moved. I think we've, as you say, we've had a lot of growth, and, a lot of that is due to the fact that, we've got a very high-performing team and a really amazing culture, and I think when you love what you do and you surround yourself with great people, it's just amazing how time flies.
Yeah, and I think the purpose of today, and I've always had admiration for you as to how you've set that up and the culture that you've provided, and also, and the leadership team that work with you in that business. But for 10 years, I imagine there's been a lot of lessons and a lot of sacrifice to get to the place you are now, like with anything, right? But take me back first, growing up, and I imagine there's a lot of traits that you have as a human that you were established as a child. You're South Australian born?
I am, yeah. I'm from a regional town in South Australia called Bordertown, not too far away from a very famous person called Pepe Buetti. He's about an hour away from me. But no, South Australian, born and raised. And I think growing up, on a farm, my parents are farmers. That was such a great upbringing. I really, I hope to replicate some of that with our children and how they're raised. But it taught me a lot of things at a young age, particularly around hard work. We didn't really have school holidays. That was just another opportunity to help out on the farm. And I think because of that fact that we really were taught a strong work ethic from a very, young stage of our lives.
You go to school, you come home, and it's straight into work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember going and playing football at AFL down there, obviously, and, my mates would rock up at 10 a.m. for the game, and I remember arriving and, I would have already done 3 hours work on the farm, and that was just how it was, and we were just so conditioned to it. But, you reflect back now, and that was such a great thing. It really has provided that drive for not only myself but my 3 siblings as well.
And then you as a dad now, it's interesting when I do speak with parents, and particularly fathers who have had that upbringing. Well, of not a hard upbringing, but certainly an upbringing that's different to our children's lives. There's a split between how we should, or what the best way forward in terms of raising our kids, because either you say, nah, I need you to experience the way that I experienced it. I'm not giving you anything. You've got to work for everything you do. And there's another view of, well, if I can help, if I can make it easier for them, because life is already bloody challenging, if I can make it easier for them, then I will. Where do you sit in those two goalposts?
Yeah, I think somewhere in the middle. Obviously, I think as, you do a bit better in life and you can afford to go on better holidays, not like you're going to leave your children home. But in the same token, we've just got our 12-year-old back from spending a bit of time on our family farm with my parents. So, I really want to push our children to get down and experience, some of the things that we experienced growing up. So I think it's somewhere in the middle, ideally.
And then you get to the Sunshine Coast to start uni. You're one of the first at University of Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, so grew up in the country in South Australia. I was fortunate enough to go to boarding school in Adelaide. That was another great experience for me. I come from a very big family, and my mum is actually one of 12, so I've got 30 cousins on that one side. So for me, Adelaide was something that I'd sort of experienced already, albeit I was enrolled to go to university there, but I wanted to go travelling. And I think as a South Australian, you hear a lot about the East Coast and particularly Queensland. So I came travelling and arrived on the Sunshine Coast, and I just remember as an 18-year-old just thinking, wow, this place is unbelievable. And so I rang my parents and said, look, I'm not coming back. This place is unreal. So, so enrolled in the university here, completed my, accounting and international business degree as it was. During that process, I worked at a local firm, and back in those days, sort of the mid-2000s, you really had to go to Brisbane and have an experience. And so that was sort of what we did. And we moved down to Brisbane for 8 years. And that then led on to the launch of Yield as it is today.
And Hayley, where did you meet your wife?
Yeah, so my wife, who is an incredible lady, she's got an amazing commercial mind and background, and she's hugely articulate. I was very fortunate to meet her through some mutual friends here on the Sunshine Coast. She is a local, and then we moved to Brisbane together, basically for our respective careers at that time.
And then at what point, when you're working for the bigger firms, when does the entrepreneurial brain click in and go, I want to start something myself?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky when I moved to Brisbane that I worked for a firm that was really cutting edge. So I had all the interviews with the Big Four and a sort of a smaller firm at the same time. And my older sister, who was very sort of instrumental in my thinking at that point in time, she's a lawyer as well, and she'd sort of worked all over the world. And, she sort of encouraged me to not go down the Big Four path, and I'm so glad she did. But I worked for a really cutting edge firm that was really ahead of their time, and I learnt a lot at that firm, and I would still be there today, albeit unfortunately they had a few partnership splits and the firm sort of fell apart a little bit. But when that happened, that sort of encouraged me to go and work for a mid-tier firm in Brisbane of about 100 people. And that was a real eye-opener because, as I said, I'd come from a firm that was extremely cutting edge. They were doing some amazing things in the industry. They were real trailblazers. And to go to a big firm and see how they were extremely draconian in the way that they sort of ran their firm, and yet they were still reasonably successful, it probably encouraged me at that point in my career back in 2012, 2013 to really start thinking about maybe I should have a bit of a look at whether or not we could launch a startup accounting firm. There were a couple of sort of factors at that time in the industry that were playing a bit into our hands. So Xero, the accounting software that everyone knows nowadays that was in the cloud, they had just bought a software company and created the ability to run an accounting firm where you didn't need a server and you could do it in the cloud. And they had created a tax component within that software. So there was sort of the barriers to entry were coming down. And, I think I sort of spent 12 months alongside Hayley writing a really detailed strategic plan around if we were to create a firm, what that would look like. And it's funny now when I sort of listen to different podcasts. I was listening to Paul Rue's talk recently about culture and creating a plan for before he became the coach of the Sydney Swans. And he said in 1998 when he retired as a footballer that he actually sat down and wrote a detailed plan as to how he would do things, basically, if he was to go into coaching and all the things he'd learned from his coaches over the journey, good and bad. And it was a bit of a blueprint that he then implemented at the Sydney Swans. He then took them to that drought-breaking premiership after 50 years and created a really strong culture. And it's funny because that strategic plan that I wrote really did set us up in that regard as well. And I think the culture we built today with Yield Advisory and a lot of the learnings, that we took and at that stage of our careers, we've been able to implement. And I think that's really led to, some of our success.
With your strategic plan, did you start that process knowing that you're going to start your own firm, or was it an exploration or a feasibility thing where you were like, well, I'll see where this goes and see how it looks before I pull the trigger?
Yeah, I think initially you're absolutely right. I think it was a bit of an exploration project and, just to really challenge my thinking and whether or not, I really thought I was up for the challenge. And but then the more I did it and the more I went into detail, the more I sort of had confidence that I could, really execute this plan. And, it was funny. It wasn't without sort of some challenges along the way. I certainly put that plan through, some of our nearest and dearest and, family and connections. And there was, probably 50% of the people told me I was nuts if I was to do this. And you got to understand at that time in the accounting industry and professional services, a startup firm was just not common. It was it just wasn't even a thing. It wasn't uncommon. It just wasn't even, no one was doing that. So it was really challenging the status quo of thinking at that time. And I think that's why a number of people sort of discouraged me from doing it. But I just knew based on, obviously the more I wrote that strat plan over the 12 months and the more, I had some clients that had, followed me all over the place for a number of years and they were very loyal, as well as obviously some very good team members that, were encouraging me to do it as well. I guess I took a lot of confidence out of that.
I think for anyone going into a new venture, whether it's business or otherwise, a lot of the fear is the unknown. And as I agree with you, as soon as, it's a very similar book that you and I were playing with when I started this, right? In the sense that the idea of starting a venture like a startup accounting firm or like a startup law firm, without knowledge or without doing that feasibility or the strat planning, you're like, nah, it's too big a mountain. But as soon as you work through the detail and you do the reps in the preparation, you go, there's nothing to be really afraid here of, nothing to be afraid of. There's still a risk. And so talk to me about that risk. Because if any investment, any what you're trying to achieve, there's always going to be an element of risk. Otherwise, you just be an employee of a Big Four. Yeah. What was the risk? Did you see the primary risk at the start?
Oh, look, I think, the risk for me was just straight failure. I think at that stage, we had a 2-year-old and Hayley was probably working, more part-time at that stage. So there was a fair bit of pressure on this project to come off when we really decided to move forward with it. And that sort of led on to, obviously my background and that work ethic really kicked into place. And that's probably what helped us, or did help us through that period of time. I remember the first 12 months I put on 9 kilos and, was working 18-hour days. And that's not dissimilar to what anyone else does. I don't think we're special in terms of how hard we went to make it a success, but that was the process we had to go through at that time. We grew rapidly. We went from sort of 2 of us to, I think in 18 months, it was about 13 of us. So it was steep growth, but it was a lot of, I think it was really just challenging in the sense that I think as an accountant, most accountants think they're very good business advisors, but as I have said, on record a number of times, I think until such time as you are the person that's actually running the accounting firm, you really are not that great of a business advisor because you haven't had the legitimate challenges that people do go through in business. So there were some real lessons through that process, but I feel so much better off for it. Obviously, I then went and got fit and shed a few of those pounds thereafter, but it was a very challenging period of time.
And what was the at that early stage, what were you trying to achieve? What was the marker of success that when you make it with Yield Advisory? When does Yield Advisory become successful in your mind at that stage?
I think the initial goal was I needed to replace my existing income, and that ticking that off was sort of the first goal in the first 12 months. And then thereafter, I think because we were sort of starting to get recognised and be successful, and I had ex-colleagues approaching me to come and work with me because obviously I had really strong relationships with these people, that, you know, the goal then changed to, well, I think we've got something pretty special here, and I think, you know, we want to create a firm that is just, you know, as I'd experienced at that previous firm, really cutting edge. We've got a great culture. I just really want people to love, you know, as soon as they step in the door, they just love the environment. And that was, I think, the focus thereafter, not only really looking after our clients, but just making sure our team members just really love the firm as well.
And then you're growing rapidly in Brisbane.
Mm.
And when does Scotty Lumsden come into the play?
Yeah, so Scott, who is a partner in the business nowadays, Scott was a good mate of mine, and we had worked previously together at another firm, and I always, you know, respected him very highly, particularly his capabilities. And so it was about month 10 in that first 12 months that he joined us. I think it was April 20. He came along, and then, you know, 2 months later, I was able to convince Emily Pears, who's now our general manager and a chartered accountant as well, to join us, and I'd worked with her previously. So we got some really impressive people into the business early, and there's no doubt that has helped our growth dramatically.
Mm. When did you decide to come back to the coast and live?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because Brisbane, or the firm, was located in Fortitude Valley at that stage, and we were growing rapidly. But Hayley and I had always promised ourselves that we wanted our children to be raised on the Sunshine Coast. Hayley was obviously a local, and I'd spent a number of years up here previously. So that was our goal. So it was about 18 months into the business, we actually relocated back to the coast, and I actually commuted, you know, for 4 days a week, I think, for the next 4 years, and slowly was able to wind it back. But in terms of then putting some focus onto the Sunshine Coast, it wasn't until COVID hit, really, because the challenge in my mind was, you know, our Brisbane business was growing rapidly, and I just didn't really want to take the focus off that too much, even though I knew we had some really great connections on the coast. We obviously knew a lot of people, and our children, you know, went to, you know, local schools, etc. But so it was really when COVID hit, I just went, right, that's a sign for me that, you know, I need to just wind back my travel commitments a little bit and focus on the local footprint here. And yeah, I'm so glad we have. I'm really in a great place now with sort of from a balance perspective. I'm 2 days a week in Brisbane and 3 in our Sunny Coast office.
Mm. In terms of age, when you started that process with the business, with Yield Advisory, you were early 30s?
Yeah, I was 30 when we started the business.
That's, you know, for all intents and purposes, that's pretty young to manage and to experience the slings and arrows of starting a business. And not just that business, I'd imagine what the early revenue would have gone past $1 million pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it was year 2 that we exceeded 1 million turnover. And I think it was double-digit growth. It really hasn't ever dipped underneath that. I think COVID probably slowed it slightly, but yeah, it's always been really strong organic growth. And I think a lot of that is because we're very, you know, not only do we look after our clients and they obviously refer their family and friends to us, but I think our referral partners, you know, we really look after them as well. And I think we reciprocate really well, and that's definitely helped with our growth.
Looking back to that 30-year-old, would you do anything different? Would you give, what advice would you give after the last 10 years? What advice would you give that Lachlan Ballinger at that time?
It's a really good question. I'm actually scrambling a bit to answer that. But look, I think, you know, it was, if I could probably tell myself that, you know, hey, it is going to work out, you know, that probably would have been nice, I think, because I went so hard.
Would you have done it less different?
No, probably not.
Because the kid from the farmland at Adelaide knows, or South Australia, knows only one way, and that's
Yeah.
to grind.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think the advice is, I think what's probably helped us over the years, not only our culture, and obviously I think we're pretty good entrepreneurs in terms of what we've achieved, but I think leadership is probably the one trait that is something you have to constantly work on. I think nowadays we've got a team in excess of 40. That leadership piece and how you handle situations, not only with clients but with your team, that's something I probably would have invested a bit more time into in the earlier days. And that's
in terms of your understanding and your own self-development around that area. Yeah, that's a good
exactly.
answer.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the sacrifice in those early days. You said you had Harrison. He was young.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I think in the first sort of maybe the first, it was probably the first 6 months. I think we worked from home, and then we went on to a shared office space, etc. And I remember just him being at home and him always wanting to come into the office, and you felt so guilty that you just had to get so much work done, and I'm probably pretty tired and that in those early times. But no, I think there's definitely been some sacrifice. I still do a lot of travel and stuff, but I really believe I've got a great balance. I'm heavily involved in Harrison's AFL, one of his coaches, and then with my daughter, I coach her soccer team, and so I think there were definitely some sacrifice in the early days, but I feel like I tried to make the family a priority at all times to get that balance as quick as I could.
Yeah, it's I think for anyone starting a business or any job that requires a lot of time and energy, it's a hard balance because you're driven to do that and do good work and increase that component of your life to assist financially or otherwise for the family itself. But by doing that, you're taking away from your attention and your time for the family.
Definitely.
And so it is, and I think to succeed in anything on a really high performance level, you've got to have periods of time of imbalance.
Definitely. Yeah. I think just trying to, I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but just trying to be in the moment with your children when you get home from work. And it is really hard when you've got a highly stressful situation that's happening with a client or, something, hasn't quite gone to plan and the like, to try and switch off. And I'm probably one of those people that I sort of wake up at 3 a.m. and overthink things and the like. But I think just trying to be in the moment as much as I can with the kids. I'm always trying to sort of focus on that and get better at it. I'm definitely not perfect there yet.
The balance thing, I think for me, what I've sort of realized over the last few months is there's going to be, especially with business or with anything you're trying to focus on, if you zoom in the time on the axis, then there's going to be days, weeks, maybe a month where you don't have that balance, where you're like, okay, I need to be all in on this project. And whether that is the soccer team carnival and you haven't touched work for 3 days because you're focusing wholly on that, or whether that's work or whatever the situation is. And that is normal. You zoom out over the space of 3 years, you've got the balance right. That's the goal. I don't think you're trying to find the balance on a daily basis, because I think that's somewhat unachievable if you're trying to find high performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think just on that high performance piece, I think, for us and for our firm, like, we're very focused on just bringing the best, potential candidates and team members. And so one thing we always promised ourselves from the start of the business, Haley and myself, is that we would continue to grow fast. And the reason why that we sort of put that into place was at that previous firm that I had worked at, they were not growing. Obviously, I mentioned they were pretty interesting how they ran that firm, but what it meant was they were losing a lot of really great talent that just never had the opportunity to grow into managers and extend their careers, basically. So for us, we believe we can recruit the top talent in the market and look after them, but also give them a really great opportunity to grow all the way through the business. We've got some incredibly talented people, and I think that's probably why the first 10 years has had some really interesting challenges and, some different things we've had to overcome. But the next 10 years, I'm probably even more excited about as we see some of our team really grow into their roles and take on more leadership.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you get people coming through the door, and you're not advertising or you're not promoting a job for leaders. It's you're finding people to come through the door who are very, very good at what they do, which is accounting or business advisory. And then through that process, you can, through your experience of the last 10, 15, 20 years of work, you can see, this person's actually demonstrating some really high-level leadership qualities.
Mm-hmm.
And so presumably when you were in your 20s, there wasn't any sort of emerging leader avenues to assist that. And even you saying that one thing you'd want to do differently as a young 30-year-old is to invest in those sort of soft skills. Talk to me about what you're setting up with these young people coming through.
Yeah, I think as we have discovered, you can grow a business to 20 people, fairly comfortably, in a sense that you're across, the relationships with all the team, all the clients, that type of thing. The challenge really comes when you go from 20 onwards, because, as a business owner, as a managing director, you are not across, and you can't be across everything in the business. So that growth for us from 20 to 40 and onwards, we've got a goal to go much further than that, is really challenging, and you need to develop your people appropriately. So from our perspective, we put a lot of time and, thinking into this, and obviously Hayley's skill set of having a background in HR and being really successful in that arena is a massive positive for us. But what we are working on is really, as you touched on, this emerging leaders process that we've put in place, where we're looking to really grow our talent, not in those, those, I guess, technical skills, but as you say, in those soft skills and how they handle situations. And, I guess the way I look at it is, if we're growing more leaders within the business, then, there's a lot more, I guess that frees up a lot more of the business and the senior people within the business to do more, because they're not getting dragged back into dealing with issues that could be dealt with people in the middle parts of the business. This emerging leaders format, I think, is really incredibly important for us as we look to grow, a lot more into the future. And not only that, just investing in leadership for these people and allowing them to grow. I think that's one of the really positive things that you see in business over time, when you can bring people in, they start as a graduate accountant, and then they grow all the way through, and you help them on that journey. There's not too many things that are more pleasing than that.
What can you do for those people to enhance those soft skills? What are you doing practically?
Yeah, so we're putting our guys that are in that emerging leaders forum through a number of leadership courses, but we also have them where they meet bi-monthly, and they really just talk through a number of the different challenges that they see within the firm, and then get their feedback on how they think we should be handling those different challenges. But really the whole ethos is about maintaining our culture as we grow, and for these guys to develop their leadership skills and capabilities. So we're bringing in, people to present to them and to help them to grow into those roles. For example, from a culture perspective, and to talk about mental health, we had Tom Boyd, the famous Western Bulldogs footballer, come up from Melbourne and speak to the extended team. And so we will continue to invest in these types of initiatives to help grow our people.
Your specific leadership team, the senior leadership team that you've fostered for a number of years, it's probably the one thing that I've been most impressed with Yield is that core group that just seems to be so loyal, and just there's so much strength and knowledge and ability within the group that you've been able to procure.
Yep.
How do you continually work, not rest on the laurel of the relationship of prior, but what are you doing continually to foster that strength?
Yeah, I think so. Our executive leadership team is comprised of myself, Hayley, Scott, Emily, our GM, Alicia, our amazing marketing manager, and Stephanie, who runs our Sunshine Coast office. So that's, I guess, all the heads of the relevant parts of the business, and not too dissimilar to the emerging leaders, which is sort of the next tier. Those respective people we meet, monthly. We not only talk about strategy, but we talk about obviously all different aspects of the business, and I think we just challenge each other in different ways. But certainly over the years, we've tried to do some things very differently, and it's amazing when you do different and put in place different initiatives, and then you read things afterwards, and you find out that initiative you put in place actually is a very good one. So one thing we did a few years ago was we got our whole executive team to basically jump out of an aeroplane together and do skydiving. And I must admit, would have been happy to do that, I think, in my 20s before I had children. Then I was a bit nervous going into that day, but everyone did that together. And it was funny, I was reading something from the Harvard Business School afterwards that basically said that if you put, all your senior leadership team into an environment where they think that they might actually die together, that actually galvanizes their relationships even further together. So that was unknown to me at that time. I just wanted to, I guess, challenge our team. And there were a couple of people that were very, very nervous about doing that, but to their credit, they did do it. And I actually do believe that our relationships, got even stronger out of that process.
Mm. And then with the team and the growing number of people that work for Yield Advisory, how challenging is it to continually foster that sort of environment within the business itself for everyone?
Yeah, I think our culture is something that we really pride ourselves on. And I was fortunate enough 2 years ago to be invited to present at the major accounting conference called XeroCon in Sydney about our culture. And I think if you really want that glue that, keeps everyone together and, makes everyone enjoy coming into the office and builds that camaraderie, that is really your, it's your culture. And so we've worked very hard on that. Obviously, having Hayley's background in the HR space has helped us dramatically. But, we've got a lot of initiatives. We do regular events. We contribute to our team's gym memberships. We have daily stretching. Our social clubs are very active. And I think by virtue of a lot of these different initiatives, we also have our own Yield ales, which I think helps with our culture as well. But no, I think when you combine a lot of these initiatives and people really feel like they are, valued within the business and they have great relationships within the business, your culture remains or is maintained as strong, which is what we've been able to achieve.
And the last sort of 6 to 12 months have been a lot of moving pieces within the business, and a lot of it probably not sort of public knowledge, but certainly events that have tested everyone within the company.
Yeah, I think, as I was alluding to earlier, I think that leadership piece is really, I guess, developed over time, and it's not like you've been provided a leadership, textbook from the start when you sort of start out in business. But leadership, I think you've got to stand up when there's challenges within the business, and we've had a couple of challenges, no doubt, over the last 6 months. But I think the positive thing is you got to go through some challenging times to create the good times, right? And I think we've done that, and we've come out the other end really bigger and stronger. And we've just completed our first acquisition and merger here on the Sunshine Coast, and we've brought in another 6 amazing team members, which we're incredibly excited about. We've I guess bought a larger space in Brisbane for our head office down there, which we're really excited about as well. So I think we've done a lot of things that are setting us up for the future. And the other thing in business is, it's a bit of a game of chess in a sense. You can make decisions and make moves today where you don't feel the impact for 6 to 12 months. And I think that's the thing. You've always got to try and keep your mind ahead of the current game. And so the merger here on the Sunshine Coast, that's taken a couple of years. The finding of a larger space in Brisbane, in the part of Brisbane that we love near James Street, that's taken 3 years of lots of effort. And so it's great that a few of these really amazing initiatives have come off in recent times. But yeah, certainly the challenging times make the better times. I think you've got to, really celebrate the better times, because around the corner in business there's always going to be a challenge, but you don't want to focus on the negative as much.
And leadership is easy when it's going well, right? Everyone can be great leaders when things are good, but when things are challenging and the team feels it, they know maybe that there is a challenge at the moment. They look at you and go, well, how are we to act? How are we to direct ourselves? What should we be doing? Which direction are we headed? I can only imagine that your leadership skills have come to the fore tenfold in this last 12 months to get through the ups and the downs.
Yeah, I think so. Look, from our end, I think we're, as you touched on earlier, with our executive leadership team, the thing I put in place a number of years ago, before we had partners in the business, was I did create that tier of decision making. So I think the positive thing about that is that it's not like it's just myself making the decision. There's a lot of feedback and discussion within those 5-6 people to really hone in on and make the right decision for the business and for the extended team. So whilst ultimately, I can probably sway the final decision, I don't normally. I really just take that feedback on board and then make a informed decision which way we go in the business. But when you've got people that you really trust and respect that are seeing different things within the business and providing you feedback, and you're all in agreement with the decision, that certainly makes it a lot easier when it is a difficult period of time within the business. So yeah, I think that's probably what's helped us through the last sort of 6 to 12 months.
On a business level, where does, like you said, the first hurdle of success, inverted commas, for Yield in the early days was just to replicate your own salary. Where is it looking now? You've gone through that first 10 years. Not to also, let's not forget that, goodness, some ridiculously high number of percent of startups don't succeed and don't get through the first 3 years, let alone.
That's right.
And you guys are off to the races now. So what does the next 10 years look like? Or let's say even 5?
Yeah, I think the next 10 years, or the next period of time, as I was touching on earlier, I'm really excited about, because I genuinely believe we've got some serious talent in our business. And as I said earlier, I just want to provide the opportunity for these guys to grow and work into leadership positions. So I think we've got a team of 40 now, and I think we've put in place a lot of processes that will help us to grow, even quicker into the future. And when I say grow fast, I mean grow in a manner that we can handle, not grow in a manner that's going to pull the business down. So I think, our target has always really been, if we could sort of become that sort of sub-mid-tier firm, around that 80 to 100, that's probably would be where we'd like to get to, because we think that, that 8 to 10 partner position, we wouldn't like to be too bigger than that. I think from my experience, it's really challenging in a professional services environment, because to run those type of businesses, you need to have enough partners to be able to run them, and the partnership group needs to be on the same page. And I think if you try and get any bigger than that, that's where you find that you've got people at different stages of their career, and they probably aren't necessarily, in agreement on most decisions. So yeah, I wouldn't put a cap on it, but I just want to continue to provide opportunities for our really talented team that we've got, and I think we've got the ability to grow to 80 plus. There's no doubt about that.
Do you think the 30-year-old Lachlan Ballinger would believe where you are now?
No, I don't think so. I think initially I probably thought, we could probably grow this to 20 people. I would have been pretty happy with that. And but I think as you have a bit of success and you realise you're doing a number of things right, and you're getting recognised. Like last year we were We won a national award at the Australian Accounting Awards in Sydney. So once you get that type of feedback from the industry and from your peers, I think that's what spurs on your momentum. But I wouldn't have thought that initially. Yeah.
And in that period of time, in the downs, let's say, how are you talking to yourself? How is the self-reflection and that self-development of going, oh yeah, probably I didn't do as well as I hoped in that situation or that conversation. I need to improve and be better. How do you critique yourself?
Again, I think this is probably one of the advantages of being in, and having your spouse involved in the business, and with her background, Hayley's background in HR, and being able to handle different situations. I've always had that great sounding board with her, and so I think there's definitely times where you haven't handled a particular challenge as well as you could have. But I think, as I always say to people in business, everyone is going to make mistakes. It's just how you just got to learn from them really fast and get on with it. And that's where you're going to, develop a successful business.
How does that conversation go at home with Hayley? Let's say, is it in between making dinners? Is it once the kids are asleep? Do you have a boardroom, in an office to talk shop, or is it just in amongst everything else?
No, I think we have a great dialogue just in between, the noise of everything else. I think our 8-year-old daughter loves interrupting those conversations, but no, that's completely fine. But no, we just, whenever we can fit in those discussions around a busy lifestyle that we lead, we do.
You just say, hey, this is also propped up today. What do you reckon?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think I was, leaning on Hayley last night about we've got, as I touched on earlier, our 10-year anniversary on Sunday, and we've got, a video and some posts going out next week, and, I was critiquing my wording on that and garnering her feedback. So just wherever we can fit in those conversations.
But wonderful to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
To have, the person like that as your spouse.
Definitely. Yeah.
Man, this has been great. And how do you think you will, how open are you in terms of your development as a human over these next 10 years of growth?
Yeah, like I'm always just focused on how I can grow and get better. We've got a off-site strategic planning day on next Monday, and one of the areas that I've challenged the other guys on is around their roles, and for us all to write down, the different things that we do on a weekly basis and the things that we shouldn't be doing on that list, and who else should be doing them within the firm. So I think for myself, it's just constantly challenging my utilisation of time, making sure that I'm working on things that have the best, most dramatic impact on the business. And constantly learning and mentoring the others where I see fit as well. So, I think I'm very open to self-growth. Absolutely.
They talk about how you have to delegate your weaknesses, but I think also there is an element or a position about delegating your strengths as well. Whatever's going to create the best outcome for the overall team, right?
Yeah.
You become as the MD, as the owner, as the founder, or as the co-owner of it. It's easy to say, well, I'm good at 6 out of 10 things, so I'm going to do those 6 out of 10 things, delegate the 4 that I'm not great at, and we'll play on. But if you just focused on 3 out of the 6 things and delegated the 3 that you're good at still, but you give it to somebody else, the overall achievement might be greater because you're just focusing on the 3 things that matter for the business itself.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think just absolutely delegating, your weaknesses. We were very fortunate a few years ago that Emily in our business, she was an absolute star. She's a chartered accountant, and she sort of was indicating to me she wanted some different challenges, and I was able to convince her at the time to become our general manager of the business. And, the last 3 years, she has grown into that role so well. And that was probably part of what I was working on, part of the business that I shouldn't have been. And when you're able to bring someone else in and they take a number of those responsibilities off you, it's amazing watching how much more time you've got to put into those more hard-hitting areas that you can make a dramatic impact, but also see that person grow into the role has been incredibly pleasing.
And then, does it come back to ego then, in the terms of being able to say, I don't need to be everything to to do everything in the business?
Yeah, I think so. In the early days, absolutely. I think you can do everything. And over time, I think you just, as you are challenging yourself to, be the best version of yourself, that's where you really have to confront those things head on and understand that, I need to really focus on the areas that have the best impact for the business. And, there is someone else here that can probably do that better than me anyway. So there is a bit of ego in it, I think, initially, but then when you realise, look, that's just better for the business, I think that's where you can sort of get past it.
I had a board meeting yesterday that was very centered around, for a different company, but very centered around focusing on exit and retirement. And I have a real belief that the value of any journey is the journey itself, and the grind and the challenges. And, business owners might be thinking, this is hard work, like the last 6 months you've gone through. But realistically, it's exactly what we want. It's what you sign up for, but it's also creates value to the whole process. How much are you enjoying it now compared to when you started?
I have always loved what I do. I'm one of those very fortunate people, and to work with business owners. So we are an accounting firm, but we do a lot of business advisory, which means that we help our clients to run better, more profitable and cash flow proficient businesses. So by virtue of that, when you're providing really, cutting edge solutions to your clients and they're able to perform better in business and become happier clients, that's a really enjoyable role. So I've always sort of loved what we've done from the get-go all the way to now. I think where I'm re-energized and reinvigorated at the moment is, again, we've recruited heavily in the last couple of months and we've just brought in some seriously good people into our business. And I think that's the beautiful thing. When you do have a little bit of turnover and then you bring in people that are really just impressive human beings, it just, reinstates your thinking about, not only the business and how good a business you've built to be able to attract those great people, but just what more you can do in the future with these really talented individuals.
And this has been a masterclass. I love it. And it's so obvious, as I said, and as I've said to other people, you walk into your firm or in the business and it just oozes professionalism, high performance, that culture. It's just there like I've never seen it before. So it's a testament to you and the team for creating that.
Oh, thank you, mate. Really appreciate that feedback.
All right. Final 5 questions. What does success mean to you?
I think success to myself, is building something that other people really appreciate and value. And I think that's where we're at with Yield, where people feel really, wrapped that they're part of the Yield team. I think that has demonstrated that we've built a successful business.
What does happiness mean to you?
Happiness to me is just balance. I think, being able to put the appropriate amount of time into our children and spend the time with my wife, Hayley, and just find that balance. I think that is happiness, because I'm an incredibly driven person. I love what I do. I do a bit of travel interstate as well, but being able to get back and sort of coach the kids' sporting teams at the same time, that is, the balance piece for me provides my happiness.
I think I know the answer to this, but the most recommended book you think people should read?
Yeah, no, I think I gave you a copy of this yesterday, so that's a loaded question. But no, Good to Great by Jim Collins. I think Jim Collins, obviously he's a Harvard professor. He's amazing in all the books that he's written, and I think just the learnings you can take into business, we apply them each and every day.
4 people who you'd invite to dinner, living or dead, but not friends or family.
Yeah, great question. I think growing up, obviously, in regional South Australia, we did was play AFL in the winter and cricket in the summer. So yeah, cricket-wise, it'd be Shane Warne. I've met him, fortunately, a couple of times before he passed away. He's, incredible what he did for that game. And in an AFL sense, probably someone like Tex Walker, the captain of the LA Crows. Two others. I think Jim Collins would be a good one for obvious reasons. And I think someone like Michael Jordan.
Yeah, fair play. And then finally, a guest who you think we should interview on the show.
Going to say Peppy, but you've already interviewed him. So
we've just been able to dry out the studio after his episode. The amount of tissues we had to get for that.
That is a very good question. I think Tom Boyd. I think he would be a fantastic guest.
Beautiful. Lachlan Ballinger, thank you for your time. It's been great, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate you having me on the show.
That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. Next time you're doing your tax returns with your accountant, let them know all about the show. It means a lot. Till next time, peace.